How dangerous is soon-to-be former Northampton District Attorney John Morganelli? He is so dangerous he ran unopposed for Northampton County Common Pleas Judge this May 2019 in both the Democrat and the Republican primary. People in Northampton County have to be scared to death of this guy to let him walk unopposed to a basically for-life position. The good news is we can end the political career of Morganelli this November 5th, 2019, because another sitting judge recently announced retirement, and the Democratic and Republican parties have selected two candidates to run for the two open seats on the bench against Morganelli. They are Democrat Abe Cassis and Republican Victor Scamelio. A vote for these men, both of them, will assure Morganelli is defanged and put out to pasture. Here are the reasons to vote against John Morganelli. First, John Morganelli supports amending the PA Constitution to give some creepy guy who feels feminine for a day the unfettered right to walk butt naked with an erect penis into a YMCA girls' locker room or a local Catholic school girls' bathroom during a CYO league game. Morganelli wants the PA Constitution amended for public accommodation to include gender identity or expression as a protected class, no exceptions. He stated so in the 2016 PA Primary Information Voter Catholic Guide Inquiry. A public accommodation is a bathroom. Once gender identity or expression is granted the protected status of race, a store or religious institution will be prohibited from banning penises in the women's and girls' bathrooms and locker rooms, just as they are prohibited from banning blacks or Asians or Hispanics from bathrooms. A man with a penis who feels like a woman for a day, under the law, would be entitled to the same rights and access as females. John Morganelli supports penises in the girls' locker rooms. No exceptions. Check out the record. Second, John Morganelli has turned a blind eye to student suicides. Pen Argyl High School and Middle School have had 4 student suicides that we know of between 2014 and 2018. November 2018, Santino Vincent Tamaro, a senior, killed himself. November 2015, Brett Liberto, a sophomore, killed himself. January 2015, Gabby Atkins, a freshman, killed herself. February 2014, Courtney Zanya, an 8th grader, killed herself. Most of these children did not have biological fathers in the household. That Morganelli could not stop. At least half of the students killed themselves with guns. Children aren't allowed to own firearms. If adults in the household had guns secured, the children killed with the guns would not have died so certainly. Morganelli did not prosecute any of those gun owners. Why? In June 2017, 4-year-old Bentley Thomas Koch, K-O-C-H, shot himself with a gun. September 7, 2018, Bentley's father, Ryan Patrick Koch, was sentenced to 1 to 2 years confinement and 3 years probation for involuntary manslaughter. Why does Monroe County prosecute a natural parent in the death of their child for failing to secure their firearms, while Northampton District Attorney John Morganelli refuses to hold responsible the reckless stepdads and mama's boyfriends and possibly parents for the gun deaths of their children in their household? What exactly is wrong with the citizens of Northampton County that reckless adults provide access to teenagers to guns and Morganelli has no pressure to prosecute? If John Morganelli failed to enforce the law as a prosecutor, he will certainly turn a blind eye as a judge. With respect to these student suicides, over half those teenagers were under psychiatric care. Most, no doubt, funneled to them through the nonprofit Families First organization with an office in the Wind Gap Middle School, which boasted 150 referrals for psychiatric help in 5 years. At least half of the 4 student suicides were on atypical psychotic medication provided by the drug pushers who were supposed to help the students. Why didn't Morganelli follow the money? What is the connection between Families First and Methodist Services for Children and Families and other linked psychiatric facilities and groups, and those groups that provide money to Families First? Is the local Grace Methodist Church getting kickbacks? Do the Morganellis own stock in pharmaceutical companies or bonds in the local medical industrial complex? Or is John's Judicial campaign accepting donations from pharmaceutical companies and psychiatrists? If John Morganelli fails to protect the public as a prosecutor, can he seriously be expected to protect the public as a judge? The third reason not to vote for John Morganelli is because, as Northampton County District Attorney, he made decisions based on race. March 2018, national news was made when 45-year-old white Kevin Esterly abandoned his wife and 2 daughters and convinced 16-year-old ethnic Chinese female Amy Yu, who Esterly had groomed for sex since she was 10 years old, to steal her mother's money and passport and take him on a sex vacation to Mexico. Real sword story, made even more pathetic by the Lehigh County District Attorneys, only obtaining a 2.5-year to 5-year sentence. The real story was if John Morganelli had done his job in February 2018, when local law enforcement learned Kevin Esterly, under false pretense that he was Amy's stepfather, signed Amy out of the Lehigh Valley Academy School in Northampton County on 10 occasions. Esterly would have been locked up in jail for weeks and would not have had the opportunity to take Amy to Mexico. Had Esterly been a 45-year-old black man and Amy a 16-year-old white female, Morganelli would have had Esterly in jail within 24 hours of being notified of the false pretense kidnapping from the school. But because Esterly was white and Amy was non-white, white entitlement controlled the situation. Morganelli to this day has not prosecuted Esterly for Esterly's 10 school abductions of Amy, proving that Morganelli does not feel that non-white female minors warrant protection from white male child predators. Another race-based failure to prosecute involves Northampton County hit-and-run death of the black father of NFL football player Steve Longa. At around 10 a.m. on September 28, 2017, Steve's father was run down like a dog and left to die. There were witnesses to this horrific accident. White 50-something-year-old Tammy Tartaglia of New Jersey was immediately determined by the police to have hit Steve's father and drove away. White privileged Tammy was not prosecuted until June 2019, over a year and almost 8 months from the time of the incident. The determination to prosecute white Tammy was only made after Steve Longa obtained U.S. citizenship and could invoke his rights to sue, full rights as to sue as a U.S. citizen, and Morganelli was selected to run unopposed as judge. Then there is the matter of the conviction for the rape, the anal rape, and murder. The theory of murder was to cover up the crime of an 11-year-old white girl named Melissa by a black man named Scott Douglas Oliver in 1991 in Northampton County. Melissa came from a fractured family and spent her time mostly with her mother and stepfather's children. And Melissa visited her father across the East in Phillipsburg, bridge. 11-year-old Melissa was out drinking beers in, I believe it was 1989, with a few teenagers, and last seen by the teenagers, who for some reason weren't deemed suspects. Then she was last seen with Scott Oliver, who was convicted. Morganelli subsequently gets elected. A few years back, the evidence was DNA tested, and male DNA was determined not to be Scott's. Then, in a strange twist, since there was proof that a black man in jail didn't do it, there was a judicial determination that no one knew where this DNA came from. The evidence is tested again, and there is no exclusion or inclusion. But a hair found conveniently placed on Melissa's dead body is determined to be consistent with Scott's. And Scott remains in jail to this day. The stepfather, who since divorced from Melissa's mother, has never been DNA tested, nor has any of the stepfather's male offspring. None of the teenagers drinking alcohol with the 11-year-old raped dead girl were tested. No one can explain where the original DNA came from that was tested and wasn't Scott's, nor can they identify the type of DNA specimen it was. And everyone is okay with this. Would everyone be okay with this if the victim was an 11-year-old black girl and the accused a white male? And lastly, for a myriad of personal reasons, based on Morganelli's race decisions, I have to disclose that I have a dog in this skirmish, literally. I am a member of a mixed-race family, and every federal judge in the U.S. recognizes a member of a mixed-race family has protected civil rights, but for District Judge Lawrence Stengel, another man who is as dangerous as Morganelli. A few years back, I had two beagles, and one got a thorn in his paw or some similar nuisance, and it was limping around but happy as can be. My racist neighbors decided to be animal rights activists and convinced the racist police officer Jonathan Hoadley, now of the Slate Belt Regional Police, and I think he's a sergeant, to bring animal cruelty charges against me. Hoadley, previously, years before, Hoadley had collected a sperm-filled condom and wrapper left by a local pedophile on our homestead, which the Pen Argyl police lost. They probably figured it was probably some white perp. My kids aren't white in this area, so who cares? Anyway, back to the beagles. The beagle gets better by the trial date. I bring both the beagles to the court parking lot and have the judge see that there is no problem. And the racist white female judge, in her last swan song, convicts me based upon the hypothetical that the dog might have gotten worse. I file a summary appeal of the conviction, and Morganelli's office decides to pursue the charges and not concede. Think about this. I was convicted based upon a hypothetical event which did not occur, and Morganelli, a seasoned prosecutor of well over a decade, elects to pursue the conviction. I show up, even more of my racist neighbors show up, and the conviction is overturned. Do you want a judge who will convict someone based upon a hypothetical event occurring? And also think about the political process that allows a man like Morganelli, who is so unfit to run for judge. What exactly are the Democratic and Republican parties doing? Lastly, years back, my two sons were discriminated against and harassed on the Pen Argyl School District basketball team, starting with the CBL feeder league program through high school. To give background, the white superintendent, William Haberl, at the time, was a weak, diminutive little draft deferment weasel, and presently our AD, and even back then, was a short, weak white guy, as is the athletic trainer. So here, short, diminutive, weak white guys are in charge of high school athletics. Tall, athletic, non-whites don't stand a chance. Pen Argyl would put out the most unathletic males on the basketball court they could find instead of my sons because whiteness was the sole criteria. It was ridiculous. The key word for most of these white entitled kids were that they were weak. No matter how bad these white kids were, white faces were on the courts. Being fed up with the racism, I posted a few videos of public basketball games that showed just how bad these white kids were to point out the racism. The videos either looked like a basketball Keystone Cops or a brawl. The white chosen ones were bad. In comes Haverhill and invites Officer John Hoadley to the school. And next thing, I have 15 separate summons for harassment by 15 separate kids. I don't know who the kids were because their names weren't on the complaints. No dates, no incidents, nothing. It was like something out of a Kafka or Camus novel. Then, as the Indians say, the honored white father, Morganelli, decides to show who is the man, and he gives an interview with the Express Times paper. Big Bad John tells the paper his office, not the local police, is going to prosecute the charges. And if I'm convicted, he will ask for 15 days jail time. After spending a ton of money on a local attorney and having a California law professor doing a law review article on First Amendments making inquiries, the charges were withdrawn. Morganelli was unfit as a district attorney, and he will make an even worse judge. Vote Cassius and Scamelio. Bury Morganelli's political career.